panelists as well. So look forward to seeing you here. Okay, KTPO, we are ready to kickstart the second edition with our first panel on brewing beers with local ingredients. So I would really like to call up our panelists and our moderator. So we first have Mr. Karthik Singh, head brewer from Longboat. Could we have you on stage, please? Our next panelist is Mr. Abhishek, co-founder of Bombay Duck Brewing. We have Mr. Manu Mishra as well from Khan Consultancy. Mr. Manu Mishra, please. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Suryakant Singh from Catamaran Brewing. And I think everyone's favorite brewer and moderator, Rohit Parwani, please.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Very good morning to the Brewer World Conclave 2023. We are here for the first...
I apologize, that was not a part of it. We have an addition to the panel. I would really like to call on board Mr. Nate Ross, please.
Right. Welcome once again to the Brewer World Conclave 2023. We are here for the first panel of for the day, brewing beers with local ingredients and giving an Indian twist to the world's most favorite beverage. All right, we have wonderful panelists here who had experience with brewing beers with many different types of local ingredients, different types of beers as well. So let's dive right into it and start understanding what goes behind using what kind of local ingredient, what kind of thought process these guys use to come up with different recipes. Now, one of the most relatable local ingredients that people can think of is ragi. So I'd like Karthik to please start off with letting us know if there was any significant discussion that happened while brewing a ragi beer.
Um, Yeah, I think the first question that most people have when they're brewing with ragi is no husks. And so that were really the question that we had in our heads is how much of ragi do we put in this ragi beer, right? A lot of times we craft brewers very much guilty of that as well, where I say this beer is this, but then we're barely throwing something in there just for the sake of calling it that, right? So I actually this one time when we made some, ragi beer a couple of years ago, went as high as just throwing straight up ragi um, into the mash and having that get stuck and suffering with a lauter that went on for 6 hours. So there were some lessons learned, and I did revisit it another time. This time we went a little lower. Again, this is what I was referring to before is where we probably added only about 5%, and it did not really give us any sort of character from the ragi. Uh, but in the 25% one, there was some bit of, like that grainy, almost rye malt like character that I noticed. These were very simple ales where we wanted to keep the IBUs low, the ABVs low, so that the grain itself can shine through.
Right.
So that was sort of like the thought process that we went ahead with ragi. The experience, I would say, was from a brewer's perspective, wasn't so pleasant. But challenge accepted. It's something that I definitely want to revisit again and see how we can work this because it is so, especially in Karnataka, the ragi is such an integral part of our culture and our food. It's
Right.
we definitely owe it to our local farmers and
Right.
everyone where we use these sort of ingredients.
Right. I'll throw it to the other panelists as well. If you guys want to chime in on different challenges you might have faced, if it's the same thing, that's fine. If you think that the customers perceive the ragi beer as something else than what you envisioned it to be, please shed light on that.
Just a question, Karthik. In Maharashtra, there are a couple of breweries who've started a millet program because of obviously the availability of water in the greater state and millets being available. They face a similar challenge where, as a percentage of the grain bill, they're restricted at some level in the amount of millets they can use in the beer. So, without getting a stuck mash or a lauter that goes on for 6 hours, is there something else that you could try to increase the content of ragi in your beer?
Well, with ragi specifically, I would. What we also sort of noticed is that even the adding some husks or something in that did not help as much because it just turns into a thick mush, right? But talking about millets as a whole, I think sorghum is like a very good. It gives out very good character, very grainy, bready like character. That is something that people can explore and does not turn into a mash, or like a pasty like substance in your mash. So that I think would be something that we can definitely explore and see. Yeah,
Right.
but that is something that we did try the hulls and did not help. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, Chinsi. I'll throw it to you now. Sticking to the theme of using sources of sugar, I understand you've made some rice lager, Suryakant, and Chinsi, you've used red poha in your beers in the past. So,
Right.
did you face similar challenges to using ragi, sorghum, and other millets, or do you think it was a whole different type of experience?
Absolutely. I think brewing with ingredients like basically brewing with adjuncts, I guess, let me just put it that way, makes you really appreciate why barley has just been like the chosen cereal for brewing beer with. The husk is something which lends itself so naturally to the process. So whenever you're brewing with something which does not have a husk, you always face a lot of challenges with lautering. Especially with rice, we've noticed that it all comes up. It becomes like this really big, mushy sort of ball, and yeah, and that's basically you don't get to go home early. That's what happens. So what we've experimented with is using rice hulls, and again for us, rice hulls really worked well for specifically with rice. It also sort of like helps us sort of tie it all together because, when you go through the process of flaking the rice, you essentially end up separating the hulls. So when you're using rice hulls or when you sort of supplement the mash with some rice hulls, you're essentially just sort of bringing it all back together. And honestly, rice hulls have worked beautifully well for us. We also have access to rice hulls because we happen to be in a fairly rural part of the state, just outside the city. So there's a bunch of rice mills around, and we actually ended up visiting a few and sort of just doing our own QC on the rice hulls and picking what we wanted.
Right. Suryakant, please chime in.
So one thing I would like to add to change this conversation was when we were doing the collaboration for the rice beer. So it was our first time we were using the adjunct at such a high quantity, and we had never done that before, especially with the rice. So we were like, okay, shall we do this or shall we not? Or shall we go for like the flaked rice or the raw rice? And then we were having the backup ready. But luckily, the good touch was like it was the first time and there was no stuck loutering, and it went out nice and easy. And I think thanks to Hulls.
Definitely. The challenge also with this particular brew that we did was we were using raw rice directly from the
Right.
farm. So cooking it down in a typical two-vessel system is also the challenge. If
Right.
you don't have a cereal cooker, you have to get pretty creative around how are you going to really cook the rice down and then add it back into the mash. So
Right.
it's great. It's great learning as a brewer for everybody.
Right. So that pretty much sheds a bit of light on what kind of adjuncts you can use to be able to experiment with different types of beers. Now, Nate, I'd like to throw it to you to give us a sense of what kind of flavoring ingredients we can use in terms of fruits, spices that are sourced locally to be able to add that flavor twist to a classic beverage.
Yeah, sure. I guess my philosophy or the way I approach using these local fruits and spices, and whether it's coffee, tea, I guess I kind of work a bit backwards where I have an idea of what I want the final beer to taste, and initially understanding, for example, a particular fruit, what kind of profile, and sort of work back on that, what malts will pair well with that. And also the style as well is very, very important as well to carry those flavors through. I guess I'm a big advocate for using fresh fruit. I know we're sort of lucky more in the brew pub model that we can do that. So I play very much on seasonality and what fruits are in season. And there's a lot of different variables, of course, that bring a beer together. So some of you guys might know I'm particularly fond of my sour beer, but I love acidic profiles. I love the acidity, and I find fruit really carries well, with those tartar profiles, but also bringing that natural sugars back from the fruit to sort of balance. And so and even going beyond that, what really drives me using these fresh ingredients is actually even on the street level. I love going on the street, drinking local fruit juices and all these new flavors, and it always just gets my mind ticking. It's like, okay, how do I turn that into a beer? So for example, probably one of the more adventurous beers I've brewed since I've been over here is I brewed a Parwani. So first time using roasted cumin in a beer, some black pepper, but really trying to capture the essence of it. And it's like when I'm putting that recipe together, it's there's no hard rule to it, but I guess you sort of back yourself with your own palate. A good thing to remember is you don't want to overdo it because you can't take that out of the beer. So, you can look at doing gentle additions. If you feel it needs more, you can always add to it. So it's definitely something that I think for the drinkers, it's really exciting to be able to have these beers, but it always takes their mind somewhere, like whether it takes them back to their childhood, You know, it's familiar flavors, and I think it just makes it a really, you know, fun drinking experience.
Right.
And like something else I always loved about doing with these sort of beers as well is it's not just a drinking experience, but it's also the visibility. You know, if you
Right.
if you're using fruits, if you use coconut, something that imparts that color, I think that's, you know, and it looks quite striking in the glass.
Right.
You know, it just makes a really fantastic drinking
Right.
experience.
So that makes it a perfect transition to go to Manu. Manu, you've been around, you've tasted tons of beers across the country, and you do have a very refined palate. So we'd like to hear from you
Oh, and
about...
is that the question?
No, that's not a question. We'd like to hear from you about the different types of beers you've tried across the country, and like Nate says, do you feel that sense of belonging to that particular state or that particular location when you drink these beers?
So I was anyways going to jump in because one thing that Nate mentioned was seasonality. We are a very large country, we're a very diverse country. You have a lot of different options, be it fruits and spices or any other local ingredients. One observation is, as you were saying, that, you know, in a brew pub model, you can still use fresh fruits. Batch to batch consistency may be a little, you know, varying if you do that. But if you are a brew pub and you are doing a seasonal beer using fresh fruits, or even if you're not using fresh fruits, it is always good to keep seasonality in check. Don't make a strawberry beer in the monsoons where your marketing team has to create a splash with an ice cube instead of strawberry because they just don't get their hands on one. It just, it is key to highlight these local ingredients and champion them in the right way. So, for example, when you made the Liechtensteiner, you guys use Mosambi in it, and it was amazing. Yeah. Or the red rice poha that you made, the red poha Mazen, sorry. I just had an opportunity to try that beer a couple of weeks ago. And I think the greatest thing is that sense of belonging, where a lot of people are, I know people who are exposed to new ingredients from our own country through this process, and it should be highlighted in the right way.
Right. On that note, I think when the brewing industry was really picking up in Bangalore, we had a proper cult following for one particular beer that was brewed at Arbor Brewing, for which Mr. Karthik Singh had collaborated. It was the Beetlejuice Lager. Was it a lager?
It was just a ale.
A regular ale, right. So please tell us how you came up with that idea to brew it, and did you know before you made it that it would work? Because I'm sure that young brewers here would want to understand if that risk is easy to take, because you don't know if it's going to work or not.
Yeah, I think this was back when I was a home brewer, and as home brewers, you want to throw everything in your kitchen, including the sink, into the beer. So it kind of a little background story of where this came from is back then when I was a home brewer, I used to go around, you know, giving some of my home brews to the brewers across the city, and so the head brewer at Arbor at that point was Logan. And so when I bought him this beer, in fact, I had taken him some other beers before that, and he was saying, we Americans, we have our beers, the Europeans have their beers, now the Australians have their beers. What does India have? 1 billion people and you can't come up with something. I was like, okay, let me get back to you on that. So went home, tried to throw some biryani masalas, try to throw some chai, but nothing really worked. And you know, it was still my nascent days of brewing. Probably did not know what I was doing until I put the beer in my mouth. But yeah, one of the ideas was to throw beetle leaves in it. And the thought process was also that beetle leaves in general are a very spicy ingredient. They burn in your tongue, right? So to sort of compensate that, I was thinking, you know, what might work, something citrusy, and then came up with an idea to just throw some lemongrass in there as well. So what we call the beetle juice today was basically off of that, and it's one of those beers that, you know, we made once and kind of never tweaked again because it just fit. Which was a very simple grain bill of 80% pale ale, 20% wheat, Munich, to just give it a little bit of a malt backbone. and just threw in the last few minutes of the boil the beetle leaves and the lemongrass, which was more than enough to sort of extract all the flavors that those ingredients had to give. But I guess what made it work or create or raised a lot of eyebrows was the unique flavor profile
Right.
of it. It's something that I guess we could call Indian because pretty much everyone in India has eaten pan at some point in their life, and uh, uh, yeah, to sum up what your question was, basically came from this thing of like trying to make something Indian, and then when you kind of do something crazy and it works, it just raises a lot of eyebrows, and that's why people kind of love that
Right.
beer. And in fact, we've done it 5 times over so far, I think, and we might be doing another one this summer as well.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. This brings me to Suryakant. Before we open it up to the audience for questions, Suryakant, you said you've made a Bambli Mas seltzer. Now, how different do you think, to enlighten the people, is it, how different is it to make a seltzer flavored with Bambli Mas than if you were making a beer with the same flavor?
Right. So as Ned said, for the brewers, we love to use like raw, like the fresh fruits, not the puree or the concentrates or the any flavoring agents like using emulsion and all. So we as a brewer, we always want like a fresh flavor should come out. And then, yeah, the main thing when the brewers want to use like local ingredient, the main purpose is so that people, the new audience, like us being in Pondicherry, we were like, the audience is very new. They don't know what's like craft beer as well. For them, the wheat beer is a shocking thing, cultural shock, beer shock, I would say to them, because they use beer as a mixer for the hard liquors. So understand that then. So for us, it's like we want to let them know like beers can be very beautiful, just not the what you have been drinking. So we, being in South India, there were major few other things which we were like working on. One was the rice, because South Indians love rice, making idli dosa and everything. And then other was coconut, which we are working on right now. And then bamblimus is something, it's like a grapefruit. It's a big fruit, like almost like a ball of it, big one, like almost a 1.5 kg size. And it has like a nice thick skin, which has a lot of bittering character. And inside, like it's orange color, which has little, again, some astringency and some citrus notes. So now when we are making seltzer, so we always plan to make seltzers in our January month, because after December hangover, and Pond is known for drinking culture, good one. So we want people to take a break. And seltzer was designed in that manner, like people who wants to like go for a break, or for like they won't doesn't cut down the alcohol, but on the cut down on their calorie intake. So that for it was. So then we thought like, okay, so seltzer, how we make is basically using sugarcane juice, honey, and water, ferment it nicely, and then blend it with the any flavoring agent, like any of the fruit or any of the flowers, any of the whatever we want for. So Bambli Mas, we thought like, okay, because people, we see like people selling Bambli Mas on the roadside. So it's very common fruit in Pondicherry or in Tamil Nadu, I would say. So we took out the skin part because we didn't want any astringency or bitterness. We want little citrus notes and some flavors of it. And yeah, so that's how we just took out the Bambli Mas, we took the juice out of it nicely, blended with some little bit of Mosambi, because we wanted more pronouncing character, because as such Bambli Mas don't have a very highlighting characters to it. So yeah, it came out really good. I would say the people love seltzer more than the ciders, I would say, in Pondicherry. It's not like how it happens in Pune, where cider is top selling product. So yeah, that's one quite, I would say, a very shocking thing as well for me.
Wonderful. So this, I think, good opportunity for us to open it up to the audience. Any questions you might have, whether technical or just general wonderings of what kind of flavors you can use?
Rohit, I have a question for you. Hi. So Rohit, I just want to go back to the Brewer World Conclave last year, 2022.
Yes.
And on one of the
Yes.
panels, I think you made a statement that went along the lines of the recipe to success is to make a pineapple sour.
Yeah.
Now, with you saying that and having Nate on this panel who has made pineapple sours, as it may be,
Yes.
I think it's an ideal time for you guys to expand on that a little bit while the mic reaches the audience.
Right. So what I was trying to say last year was one of our contemporaries, Sumang, who's not here today, he had some experience using pineapple in making a sour beer. And it's a very tropical flavor. It's got quite a nice little tinge to it, which you can connect with. So that's pretty much what made us realize that it's quite a successful ingredient to use, whether you're smoking it or whether you're using it as such. Nate, I don't know if you concur or if you've had any of the different experiences while using pineapple. Specifically pineapple, because apparently that's
You
the
mean
key to
smoking it
success.
and adding it into the beer?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I wouldn't use pineapple. No, that's a joke. But yeah, no, the thing is with those certain type of fruits, and I know my own experience and chatting with other brewers, it's quite hard to capture that pineapple character to really come through. But you know, like I actually really dig using pineapple, but often I'll pair it with other fruits or pair it with citrus. Lime's a classic pairing, so but I'm all for the sour beers, so keep them coming.
Right, so if there's no more questions from this side of the stage, we'd like to open it up to the gentleman there.
Yeah, this is Amol from Miura. I have one statement to make and one question. So Miura is a mash filter supplier, and we have experience of using 100% materials which are without husk, or like 100% ragi, cassava, sorghum, even rye. There are beers which are using 100% of such adjuncts. So I'll be able to help you. Maybe we can discuss later. I have a presentation later today, so I'll be speaking about it. Second question is, we have a long history of Ayurveda and the tradition. So have we ever thought of using those kind of ingredients making beer?
Please jump in if you can.
Suryakant can.
So yes, we were like right now looking for the beers which has long of a history. But then, so when you see when the people say they have a secret ingredient in the beer, so this secret ingredient, what I personally found it was prohibited or it was intoxicant. For example, there's one psychedelic beer where they use magic mushrooms.
Where is this, man?
There is.
Where,
And
in
if you-
India?
No, not in India, of course. It will happen, but surely.
I'm sure you can connect with Surya later.
Yes, I'm working on it. So, people used to use magic mushrooms, weeds, everything in their beer, and after some time, it just got in. Like people were like, no, this is like things which give a black image to the beer. So people start prohibiting it. But then, yes, their beers do exist where people have been using ganja and everything in the beer, and I have personally also used it, and that tastes really delicious.
So actually, just to add to what Surya said, there's a really huge diversity of botanicals that
Right.
you
I was just
can
getting to
really
that.
dip into when you look into Ayurveda textbooks and stuff, and all kinds of roots and dried flowers and barks, and a lot of it's just really out there, and definitely there's great inspiration to be drawn from there. I think a lot of the gin guys are sort of like on
Yep.
it already. So absolutely, I mean, there's a wealth of like flavors there that can be explored in beer as well.
Anybody else? Yes. Feel like an auction here.
Hi,
Yes.
I'm Janvi Kaushik from United Brewers. So, since we were discussing millet brewing, do you think the shelf life would be affected in comparison to the regular beers or lagers that we're making?
I wouldn't think so, no, because at some sort of ABV, right? Of course, the character of the beer might change over time, but I would say most lagers, the max you would go is probably 6 months. But adding millets, I don't think alters in any way the shelf life of it.
Thank you.
So for a change, I would say I think shelf life of the beer might be little lesser, is because when you see the lagers, they're like very clean and crispy. There's nothing to hide in it. So barley itself has got a character, it just clears up the palate very well. Whereas the millet has got that character. So after a time, I feel like these flavors might diminish slowly and slowly. So if you say for the lager it's 6 months, it might be 3 months or maybe also 4 months at the max. Really, after adding all the preservatives you can in your beer to save the flavors. But then, yeah, we do not recommend that.
But we're about fresh beer anyway, so
Yeah,
Yes.
so we do not do that.
Plus, I've recently learned that adding magic mushrooms will increase your shelf life.
in your head.
Personally and for the beer as well.
Anybody else for questions? Yes, Samir.
Hi, Samir Patwardhan, Kimmer Brewing. What was the hardest ingredients that you guys worked with? Was it pineapple? Was it millets? Was it rice?
Yes. Gents, please. Just name your hardest ingredient.
I think millets, hands down.
Millets.
Ragi.
Ragi
Let's not
specifically.
generalize as millets, but I would say ragi. Yeah. Made some small batches with sorghum, but it wasn't as challenging as working with ragi because it just turns into a mush in 15, 20 minutes tops. So
Fruits then. How about fruits?
fruits. I know Samir makes an amazing kokum cider, but it's a very delicate balance. Sometimes more is not always better.
Right.
Like I guess with the sort of clientele that we have in India, if you were making a watermelon beer, right, then more might be better.
Right.
Same goes for mango. But there are some fruits that you probably have to worry about how it balances out, and also the base style.
Right.
Whether you're throwing it into just an ale, or if the base style is a saison, and how much of that do you want to retain? Like that's a question that you should probably ask yourself as well when you're deciding to throw some sort of fruit into
Right.
it.
Nate, you
But
want
yeah,
to jump in?
balance is the key.
Okay. Nate, you want
Yeah,
to
I'm
jump in?
just.
I was going to say, probably from a processing standpoint, I find guava a bit tough to, sort of pulp it up and work in the brew house or in the guava. Yeah,
yeah.
just because if it's, it's quite a hard fruit, and depending on when you get it, and every brewery setup's different. So if you're just slinging it straight into the fermenter post fermentation, dealing with having to rack the beer off the fruit, and I'm sure we've all suffered blocked valves and stuck fermentation vessels that you're trying to somehow grab a straw and get the beer out of to bright tank. Yeah, so
We have a tiny, like 1.5-inch port on the fermenter, and
Oh.
and all the stuff just settles at the bottom, and that's the worst part of like doing
yeah.
anything with pulp or fruit. So
Yeah. So, but yeah, for the love of the game.
We've got a question there at the back.
Krishna?
We'll come to you next. No, not Krishna. The gentleman there at the back. We'll come to you next. Sorry.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, this is Shyam from Alpha Level. I have a question. Like I understood, you have got tested almost all the beers in India. So, what do you think? Which one brand do you think has the potential which can go pan India and become commercially successful, as well as be loved by the consumers?
Okay. This requires some careful thinking.
I think the question is, of course, directed at Manu.
Thanks, man.
expert taster.
Just to clarify, right? So, I think the most joyous part about this whole journey around craft beer and craft alcobev as a whole is the sheer diversity that you can have. I mean, people talk about beer styles, having about 100, 150 styles. I always tell people that that is before the brewer adds his or her own creativity to the recipe. And I mean, the possibilities are endless. So I think it's a little one-dimensional for me to try and answer that question with just one brand or one beer that stands out. It's always, I like to say that my favorite beers are the ones that make me think when I take a sip and I'm like, okay, I see the ingredients, I guess I see what the brewer's trying to do with this particular beer. But if a beer makes me think about what went on in the brewer's mind while they were making it, why was the balance of ingredients done in a particular manner? What was the grain bill? What were the decisions that led to the beer in my hand? I always appreciate that, and I think that's a great beer. I had a couple of them yesterday in Bangalore as well, so yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Yeah, I'll just add to that as well, because I think beer is a bit like food. So expecting one brand to sort of work for everybody never really is the point. We're all about, encouraging people to go and try out what's local, to the geography, because
Right.
that also what helps us bring in the diversity of local ingredients into the beer. So I think definitely for me, I'm not really looking for a brand that would sort of work across the country. India is too diverse a country for that. In fact, I would encourage people to go out and try your local beers, which are not available anywhere else in the country. And to me, that's the best part of craft beer.
Right. That's a good point. Well made.
I think what I tell people is when someone comes to me and asks me, what's your favorite brewery or what's your favorite beer, I tell them the right question is, what's your favorite beer at every brewery?
Wow.
Deep. Man.
Krishna.
I would like to add one comment. I totally agree with you that we should go local. But having said that, we should also think of if I like dosa, which is like a kind of South Indian dish, but if I'm traveling or if I'm in north of India, I would still like to have and go with with idli or dosa, whatever it is. So it would help, but yes, I still agree with you what you said.
And to your point, I will say that there's different types of dosa. So which dosa do you really like?
Ooh, butter dosa.
And I would say they are not every dosas can be, like say when you even think of sambar, which basically adds charm to the dosa, that's different everywhere. So I would say craft beers are always good in going and drinking the microbrewery itself in the tap room or in the brew pub itself instead of having in the bottles. So I would not ever like to see my beers in the bottles and getting destroyed by the shopkeeper guys. So it's better to have it in the tap.
Yes, we have time for 2 more questions, one from Krishna and then one last one.
Yeah, okay. Guys, really good talk. When you're talking about raw materials, most of the time you're looking at it as being something more seasonal. This is actually more like 2 parts because for example, Chinsi, Rohit, you guys have done a little bit of work in backward integration, like you with your limited edition rice release, Rohit with a lot to do with ragi. So to actually bring in the local cereals more in mainstay, you have to work backwards with the farmers. So do you all see that do you see a lot of scope for that? And how would do you actually see it as an idea to make it more like a mainstay? Seeing that raw material imports are becoming more and more difficult.
So I think that's a great point because when we are sitting here advocating the use of local ingredients, it's not just about going to your market and buying what's available locally, but actually going a step beyond that and going at the farm level and finding where it's grown, working directly with farmers. Again, one of the ideas behind that is, hey, if you're able to really drive that value and pass the value up the supply chain to the farmer, you're actually sort of encouraging them to invest better on farm level practices and grow good stuff for you, which is basically, I think we can all agree that, we are chasing flavor here. And it all starts at the farm, which essentially, beer is an agricultural product. And we draw a lot of inspiration from fine dining and food restaurants wherein the whole farm to table movement is really starting to take root. We're starting to see a lot of that happening in beer as well. I think, I don't know where does it go, I think, but more than that, I think it's here to stay. I don't know, if it's really going to be scalable in a way where everybody's going to start doing that. I don't know, but we're here to make a difference and we do what we can.
I think the breweries, when you look at how people approached this topic, say about 5 or 8 or 10 years ago, and then looking at the incredible work that's been done in this avenue. Like you said, Rohit's done a lot of stuff, Chinzi's done a lot of stuff. There's a brewery in Maharashtra called Oi Brewing, and they're basically called Oi Brewing because they're trying to make their beers from all organic ingredients. And when they started out, they realized it isn't really a part of our farm practices around. And I think now they've actually helped their maltster get organic certification. And now they're working with their farmers so that all the malt they use that's sourced locally is going to be organic. And then they want to get the same thought process to, hops maybe 3 to 5 years from now. And it's just amazing to see a brewery working up the supply chain and essentially working towards establishing a local sustainable supply chain. I think that's amazing.
One final question, if anyone has any. Yes. The lady there in the middle. I don't recognize her.
Thank you for that. Guys, good to hear all this. I just wanted to understand one thing. is there any particular state or region which is really trying local ingredients and that thereby defining the craft culture? So if you can tell us that.
I think this is the time this panel starts fragmenting.
I mean, I guess Chinzi can answer that better, but I would have to hand it to the brewers from Maharashtra, because we definitely see them striving a lot more. We definitely have to learn from the folks in Maharashtra, our colleagues there, and sort of follow that path with Nakul, Chinzi. I know Chinzi prefers going to the market, going deep, finding out what's there himself, and not just try and make a phone call to like, hey, get me this ingredient. Like he's the one who will take that extra step. So maybe you can talk a little more about that.
I remember when we were all home brewers abroad, of course, and Chinzi would go to the northeast with an entire kit and try to isolate yeasts in the local yeasts in the air, take test tubes, come back, and then try propagating that stuff. You remember that stuff? And even Anita, the gentleman sitting in front of you, Samir from Kimaya, I think one of the first beers is he went and he sourced Mahua from somewhere, and he made a Mahua barley wine, and yeah, he's shaking his head.
I remember that. No,
it was quite an intense beer.
We're not going to let him live
But
that.
I think everyone's doing their bit, but for me personally, I came across a lot of local experimentation starting from Maharashtra that may make me a little biased, but guys.
Yeah, even I think so. Like Maharashtra has been doing a lot of craft beer. I think the major reason is because I feel like the brewers there are quite united. People share their knowledge very well. All the brewers sit together, drink beer, talk shit, and again discuss beer. But then what I have not seen anywhere else in other part of the country, in India. So it's like, for example, Bangalore, when you go, like, you feel like, oh, why he's not talking to me? Why they are saying this big cliche?
Which brewers have you met, man, in Bangalore?
I will not name them, come on.
We have such a strong camaraderie here.
Exactly. So if you see, like, we have a 65 plus microbrews over in Bangalore, but when you see collaboration happening, that's quite very less. And when you even see collaboration happening, it's between Pune and Bangalore. Not
because
much in
it's
Bangalore
easier to travel between Pune and Bangalore than Bangalore to Bangalore.
I mean, like, not...
Anyway,
So
okay.
yeah, that's one thing.
Right.
Like uniting everyone together, which makes like sharing knowledges really well and like expanding their horizon. For us in Pondicherry, we are the only one right now. So yeah, I can say like, yeah, Pond is doing well.
Right, so this brings us to quite a nice conclusion in understanding that to be able to discuss these things, we need forums like this, which thanks to Brewer World, we are getting on a regular basis, where we can come and share ideas and understand what goes into different types of processes. And to conclude about the panel, I'm sure everybody would agree in telling all the young brewers that the only way for you to learn how to use any local ingredients is to actually just use it, understand how it works. You fail, you fail. If you succeed, that's good. But if you don't try it, you won't know. If there's no other questions, then we'll like to... Yes, last question, quickly. Mike.
This is something that really made me think a lot after listening to one of Manu's questions. Last year you said pineapple was the flavor for sour beers. What do you think we can expect in terms of fruit this year? From your words of wisdom, please.
I don't know in terms of fruit, but in terms of psychedelic substances, I think there is a very promising candidate. Now, there's no specific trend that I see personally, but you know.
I'll add to that a little bit. So we've been exploring the diversity of citrus fruits, and honestly, there are a ton of them. We did a beer with Umang last year, and we found these little bitter oranges called Herlakai. I'm probably butchering the name.
If it's pineapple, it's not right. If it's
It was not
it's
pineapple
right.
though. It was not pineapple, but it was citrus, and the diversity of citrus is just mind blowing, especially if you go towards the northeast of the country. And I think citron is probably like that's the birthplace. I think it was sort of like originated from there and sort of traveled everywhere else in the world. But just for us, citrus becomes, when we think about like lime or lemon, it's very one-dimensional. But there's quite a few popular citrus fruits as well, which have their unique sort of flavors. I think Gondoraj is something which people have heard of. And there's a whole lot of them out there, really.
Right.
And I mean, I wouldn't even be doing justice if I start picking a few names.
Right.
Definitely citrus fruits.
All right, so citrus is the way to go for 2023. We'd like to thank Karthik, Abhishek, Manu, Suryakant, and Nate for joining us on the panel, and thank you everybody for participating and your questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Sorry, before you all leave, please don't get down. We have some souvenirs. That was a great session. Very informative. I'm sorry we're missing two, but for Rohit, Parwani, thank you for moderating a great session. The next one is to Mr. Manu Mishra. Then we got one for Mr. Abhishek.
Where's my only cigarette?
I do apologize to Mr. Nate Ross and Mr. Suryakant Singh. We had you as late joinees on this panel, but we will get your mementos and souvenirs across. So sorry. Could we get one group photo with the moderator and our panelists, please?